Come è possibile che tanta sofferenza possa abbattersi su uomini, donne e bambini innocenti e che anche quando cercano di entrare in altra parte gli chiudono la porta e sono lì al confine perché tante porte e tanti cuori sono chiuse. I migranti di oggi che soffrono all'aria, senza cibo e non possono entrare, non sentono l'accoglienza. A me piace tanto sentire quando vedo le nazioni, i governanti che aprono il cuore e aprono le porte.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has criticized certain European countries for their handling of the continent's refugee crisis. In an interview with the German newspaper Bild, Ban said building barriers, discriminating against people, or sending them back will not solve the problem. The UN chief called for a proper response to the biggest human crisis Europe has been facing since World War II. He also praised the German leadership in dealing with the influx of refugees and urged other European Union nations to follow suit. Ban's comments come as thousands of refugees fleeing war and poverty in the Middle East and Africa were stranded at European borders.
So my plea today is that we need governments around the world to show leadership, to analyze the situation, to understand exactly what their countries can do, how many refugees they can assist, and how, in which particular communities, and to what time frame, to explain this to their citizens and address their fears based on not emotion, but on a measured assessment of what can and must be done to share the responsibility and to get on top of this situation.
Nordic and Scandinavian countries are leading the cashless revolution. In Norway, just 6% of the population are still using cash. So CCTV's Dan Williams traveled to the capital, Oslo, to find out why paying digitally is so popular.
A freezing morning in Oslo as a ferry cuts through the icy harbour. Nearby, fishermen sell their catch. Tellingly, most of the customers pay by card. Almost everything in Norway can now be paid for by card or digitally, leading one of the country's banks to question the need for cash.
The main reason is that all Norwegians are going digital. Only 6% of our customers are using cash on a daily basis. Cash is actually fueling the black economy. And we are very worried about anti-money laundering from a bank's perspective. And obviously cash is easier to move around than digital money.
On the busy shopping streets of Oslo, the idea has had a mixed reaction.
Well, I don't like that. I want to use the Norwegian money. It's a kind of feeling of using money, and I like to have control of money.
I've gotten rid of all my cash years ago, so I think that's especially in Norway. I think in a few years there will only be credit cards, or maybe not even credit cards, perhaps only using your phone.
Norway would appear to be better placed than most to take the leap into becoming a cashless society.
Digital transactions are quickly replacing cash in Sweden, where even street vendors carry card readers. In fact, 8 out of 10 major banks in the country no longer dispense or take cash. Children have pocket money transferred into their accounts and they pay for things using debit cards, while adults seem to embrace the idea of having a cashless society.
Going cash-free would be good for preventing crime.
Say what? I don't use cash anymore. Actually, I have zero cash on me.
I tend to just use my card, like my debit card, or sometimes I use Swish.
I pay with my card because my mom and dad put money on my bank.
Korea is seeing similar changes. Last year, card payments accounted for 39% of all payments in the country, beating out cash transactions, which were at 36%. And money transfers have been made easier than ever with the introduction of smartphone banking apps. On top of that, the Bank of Korea has announced a plan to get rid of coins by 2020. With these technological developments and the potential benefits of cashless societies, paper money and coins may soon become a thing of the past.
To Belgium, where a suspect in the Paris terrorist attacks has been reportedly shot and arrested in a raid in Brussels in the district of Molenbeek. Shots have been reported from the scene of the police raid. 2 people are said to have been injured. Salah Abdeslam, the last suspect in the Paris attacks, is believed to have been among them. Salah Abdeslam is a French national born in Brussels. He'd been living in Molenbeek prior to the November 13th attacks in the French capital, which left 130 people dead.
The Belgian Prime Minister says the country's terror alert will stay at the second highest level, a day after a deadly police raid on a house in the capital, Brussels. Charles Mitchell says the National Crisis Centre will maintain its Level 3 alert level, which means a threat is possible and likely.
Clashes have broken out in Spain between police and students who were demonstrating against the government's planned reforms in higher education. Police in Pamplona fired projectiles to disperse the student protesters, who in turn pelted the officers with stones. The government's reforms, which would significantly increase the cost of higher education, have sparked outrage among students over recent months. Under the proposal, it would take students 3 years to earn a bachelor's degree and 2 years to attain a master's.
Clashes have broken out between French police forces and protesting students in the capital, Paris. Scuffles erupted after thousands of university and high school students staged a rally to voice their opposition to government reforms in the labor section. Protesters lit flares and threw smoke grenades at police. Police in return fired tear gas and arrested several people. Similar rallies were held in Lyon, Marseille and Rennes as part of nationwide demonstrations against the government of President François Hollande. Protesters say labor reforms will prevent employers from employing new workforce.
Captured on surveillance video, the moment a bus carrying government workers explodes in Peshawar. Officials say more than a dozen people were killed in the blast and scores of others wounded. A hospital official says the death toll is likely to rise. A militant group allied with the Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility, saying it was revenge for death sentences against a group of Islamist militants. Since 2014, Pakistani security forces have stepped up their fight against the Taliban. And while the number of bombings has fallen off, officials say this latest attack demonstrates that civilians are still vulnerable.
An explosion has rocked Turkey's largest city of Istanbul. We'll show you some of the latest pictures now as the blast allegedly took place in one of the city's busiest spots. These are, again, some of the latest pictures now coming from Istanbul. The governor says there are 4 victims. They also claim that the explosion was caused by a suicide bomber. 20 more people are reported to have been injured. Now, the street where the blast took place is very popular among tourists. There are many consulate buildings located in that area. As we show you some of the latest pictures from Istanbul in the aftermath of this blast, the police presence there certainly being bolstered. Let's bring in our team.
Bomb attack on a mosque in Nigeria has left at least 24 worshippers dead and 23 others injured. The attack took place on the outskirts of the northeastern city of Maiduguri, the command center of the military's war against Boko Haram. Local sources say that 2 female bombers blew their explosives inside and outside of the mosque in a short span of time. Several bombs have exploded in recent months at roadblocks leading into Maiduguri. This is the first attack on the city since December, when Boko Haram attacked with rocket-propelled grenades and multiple bombers, killing at least 50 people.
Another challenge for the next president will be North Korea. This week, the U.S. slapped new sanctions on the North for its recent nuclear test. Today, the North responded by launching 2 ballistic missiles. David Martin has that.
The first missile, fired off the back of a truck, flew about 500 miles into the Sea of Japan. The second one disintegrated before it got over water. Both were medium-range missiles capable of reaching Japan. They were launched without warning, although missile defenses were already in position in South Korea, Japan, and the Sea of Japan to shoot them down if necessary. The missiles were never a threat, but one defense official called the shots the edgiest thing North Korea could do, short of firing off a missile with a great enough range to reach the U.S. North Korea fired the missiles in defiance of new economic sanctions ordered by the Obama administration and in response to annual exercises going on in South Korea. The missile launches are one more step in the seemingly inexorable buildup of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Its young, brash leader, Kim Jong-un, was recently photographed with what was described as a miniaturized nuclear warhead small enough to put on top of a missile. And he boasted a North Korean hydrogen bomb could destroy New York City. That may sound like bluster, but the Pentagon can't afford to ignore it and keeps U.S. missile defenses on near constant alert. Kim Jong-un has also ordered more underground nuclear tests, and U.S. officials say those could come at any time without any warning. Scott?
Donald Trump, fresh off major victories overnight, now warning of riots if the Republicans try to stop him at a contested convention. Trump winning several states, those in bright red on the map, but not winning Ohio, which makes it much harder for him to reach that magic number, the total delegates he needs to clinch the nomination before the convention. Trump now calling on the party to embrace him, saying you can't ignore the tens of thousands who've turned out for him. ABC's Tom Yamas with Trump's warning tonight.
Tonight, Donald Trump warning if the Republican establishment tries to block his nomination, there will be chaos at the convention.
I think you'd have riots. You know, I'm representing a tremendous, many millions of people. I think you would have problems like you've never seen before. I think bad things would happen. I really do. I believe that. I wouldn't lead it, but I think bad things would happen.
Trump's words come in with these images still fresh in American minds. Anger and violence at his campaign rallies. Trump now saying it's time for, quote, a natural healing process.
We have a great opportunity, and the people that are voting are Democrats are coming in, independents are coming in, and very, very importantly, people that never voted before. It's an incredible thing.
This morning, Florida Governor Rick Scott falling in line, endorsing Trump, telling other Republicans to accept and respect the will of the voters. But Ohio Governor John Kasich, fresh off a big victory in his home state, now vowing to fight all the way to the convention floor, but with a positive message.
I want to remind you again tonight that I will not take the low road to the highest office in the land.
This morning, Donald Trump
Trump finds his own family is now the target of threats. A threatening letter containing a suspicious white powder was sent to the Manhattan home of Eric Trump, one of the candidate's sons. The FBI, Secret Service, and the NYPD are all investigating.
Eric Trump's wife opened the letter at their home in the Trump Park East building. That's just south of Central Park. And that is where Don Daler is right now. Don, good morning.
Good morning. The letter arrived here at Eric Trump's luxury apartment in Manhattan. Last night, Thursday night, the police swarmed this area after Laura Trump opened an envelope that had been postmarked from Massachusetts and noticed that it contained some white powder. Initial field tests indicate that that powder is not hazardous, but the letter also contained an explicit threat. According to sources close to the investigation who tell CBS News that the letter said if Donald Trump doesn't withdraw from the presidential election, his campaign stopped, that his family would be harmed. 32-year-old Eric Trump is Donald Trump's second oldest son. He's been a fixture on the campaign trail, often appearing behind his father at events. Incidentally, this is not the first threat to Trump this week. Earlier this week, the hacker group known as Anonymous issued a threat saying that they are going to declare total warfare against Trump.
Hacker collective known as Anonymous, seen screen right there. Well, now they have claimed that they have posted online, they have hacked into Donald Trump's personal information. They have posted online one of his cell phone numbers, his social security number, home addresses, where he lives, personal information close to his family, his spokesperson's information, his campaign manager's information, and information for various family members as well.
When I heard this morning, jaws were dropping because this is ridiculous. You know, this is not how democracy works. You're releasing someone's social security number.
This is how hackers work.
Home address.
And these guys are terrible. I mean, one day they're going, they're hacking ISIS. The next day they're hacking who they think is the enemy of America, and that is the Trump family. But that's not the only attack, Ainsley. More are coming, including ones coming up on Saturday. There's going to be a big rally, I assume a rally. It's going to be in Columbus Circle. That's March 19th, posted on Facebook for everybody who wants to rally against Donald Trump and what they say are his policies.
Yeah, apparently this is an outfit. It's a pro-soccer group. It's called Cosmopolitan Anti-Fascists. There's a soccer group here in New York City, the New York Cosmos. And so at this rally, which is the same day that a Black Lives Matter group is going to be rallying out in Phoenix, and what they said on their Facebook page was Trump's policy threatens many of us in the Black, Latino, LGBT, Muslim, and other communities. And they say, come to Columbus Circle, which is up on the west side of New York City, and then we're going to march over to Trump Tower and let him know that hate does not work.
After completing this exhaustive process, I've made my decision. I've selected a nominee who is widely recognized not only as one of America's sharpest legal minds, but someone who brings to his work a spirit of decency, modesty, integrity, even-handedness, and excellence.
63-year-old Garland is currently Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. He was picked to replace long-serving conservative Justice Antonin Scalia, who died on February 13th. Supreme Court justices are appointed for life, and the body's rulings can powerfully influence the treatment of major social issues in the U.S. Scalia's death abruptly ended the conservatives' 5-4 advantage in the court, giving Obama an opportunity to tip the balance from majority conservative to liberal. Garland is Obama's third justice nomination after Sonia Sotomayor and Eleanor Kagan.
The nation's second busiest transit system is closed this morning for critical safety inspections. The Washington's Metro's unprecedented 29-hour shutdown is crippling the morning commute for more than 700,000 daily riders. The federal government is open, but many of its employees can work from home today. The D.C. Metro has 91 stations along nearly 120 miles of track. Jeff Begaze is outside the McPherson Square Metro station. Jeff, good morning. What's going on?
Good morning. This is one of the stations that's undergoing emergency inspections. There was a tunnel fire here on Monday. It was an electrical fire, and that's what led to this system-wide safety concern. Crews will snake through tunnels today to get a closer look at hundreds of electric cables. The concern is potential erosion along cables which power the third rail and the trains throughout the D.C. Metro system. D.C. Metro Chief Paul Wiedefeld said it was the only choice.
The safety of the public and my employees is paramount.
District employees and students have been urged to rely on the city's bus system.
I'm wondering if it'll actually be back up in 29 hours.
The amount of traffic with Metro closed is going to be terrible.
Out of the blue, it's like every line shut down for one day. It's a bit concerning.
I'm just trying to deal with what I know and what I fear.
What transit system leaders fear is a repeat of last year's fatal incident at L'Enfant Plaza. One person was killed after power cables generated hazardous smoke conditions. The electrical fire early Monday in a tunnel snarled service and closed 3 lines for repairs.
It's happened twice in a year, so I can't wait for the third time.
Just last week, Wiedefeld sounded the alarm when he spoke to the National Press Club about the 40-year-old rail system.
It's much worse than I expected, and maybe even publicly we've been talking about.
The governor of Michigan and the Obama administration's top environmental official are under fire for their roles in the water crisis in Flint. EPA Chief Gina McCarthy and Governor Rick Snyder received harsh words at a government hearing, with some calling on both to resign. House Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz told McCarthy the, quote, courageous thing to do is abandon her position as the nation's top environmental protection leader. Meanwhile, Democrats on the committee say Governor Snyder is to blame for the situation.
Democrats and Republicans are furious about Flint.
This is dated in June. Yep. And not a damn thing was done.
It's very ironic that Michigan's slogan was Pure Michigan, because that was not the case.
Both sides are split about who bears responsibility for allowing lead-poisoned water to flow into homes and businesses and schools for so long. Democrats say it's Governor Rick Snyder's fault.
Plausible deniability only works when it's plausible, and I'm not buying that you didn't know about any of this until October 2015. You were not in a medically induced coma for a year.
But Republicans are blaming the federal regulators at the EPA, telling Administrator Gina McCarthy to resign.
You need to take some responsibility, because you screwed up and you messed up 100,000 people's lives. 100,000 of them. 10,000 of those people are 6 years old and younger. And you take no responsibility.
Those 100,000 lives are just in Flint. There are 6 million people spread across all 50 states getting water with unsafe lead levels from 2,000 contaminated water systems. That's according to a Blockbuster USA Today network investigation. Among the biggest problem areas, 353 schools and daycare centers in 42 states with dangerous lead levels in either the water fountains students drink from or the faucets in cafeterias where their lunches are made. The states with the most affected facilities like that are Maine, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, and one sink at an upstate New York school had water toxic enough to be officially designated hazardous waste.
There are millions of homes that are served by what are called lead service lines. These are lead pipes that are connecting your individual house to the water main out in the street. And one expert says it's the equivalent of having your water delivered through a pure lead straw.
These troubling new numbers may even rise, since the only schools and daycare centers that have to test for lead are the 10% that have their own water systems.
You know, Flint, Michigan has taken a lot of hits. All of its manufacturing jobs went bye-bye, and it became an impoverished ghost town, basically. And now their drinking water is a disgusting contaminated sludge. Flint has not had it easy, to say the least. But still, I'm not so sure Flint is the community we want to go out on a limb for. Well, not me. I'm not really saying that. That is what someone from the EPA actually said about the water crisis in Flint, that Flint isn't worth going out on a limb for. An internal memo just surfaced between the EPA official who oversees Michigan, a branch manager in the EPA's Region 5, the associate director of the Water Division for Region 5, and an EPA environmental engineer. The memo was presented by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. And in it, one of those EPA officials makes clear that they're not so sure Flint was worth helping.
A nuclear power plant in Florida is leaking radiation into a bay along the Atlantic coast. That's according to a study conducted by the University of Miami. Critics say the findings confirm long-held suspicions the state regulators are failing to protect the public. Marina Portnaya has the story tonight from Florida.
The Turkey Point power plant right behind me has been around for 4 decades. It reportedly supplies power to more than 1 million homes, but critics say it is a public health threat and an environmental danger. According to a study commissioned by Miami-Dade County, a system of cooling canals surrounding the nuclear facility is running too hot and too salty, causing radiation to spill into the water. Sampling conducted by the University of Miami found levels of tritium, a radioactive isotope, 215 times above normal. Turkey Point is located next to Biscayne Bay, which stretches 35 miles long. The facility stands between 2 national parks and along a coast subject to hurricanes and storm surges. Florida Power and Lighting, the utility company operating the facility, expanded the plant's reactors in 2013 to increase power production, a move critics warned would pose a serious threat to the ecosystem. Just last month, a judge ruled that FPL had failed to prevent hundreds of thousands of gallons of wastewater from seeping into the bay, threatening a well field that supplies drinking water to the Florida Keys.
To be so many flamingos in the Uru Lake just south of the Bolivian city of Oruro. Now these majestic pink birds sift through shallow, rubbish-strewn waters. They had no choice to migrate here after Lake Pupo, Bolivia's second largest body of water after Lake Titicaca, dried up. The lakeside fishing village of Untavi is virtually deserted.
I think that we who live here have to ask Mother Earth for rain and pray to God. This is punishment from God, because the people are not taking time to acknowledge Him.
Severe weather slamming the Midwest, storms, twisters ripping through the region overnight. 20 million people caught in its path. Ginger, of course, is tracking it off for you.
Yes, Rob, and I start with a picture of the Willis Tower, lightning striking downtown Chicago. At least 50 severe storm reports from Missouri to Michigan overnight. Overnight, hail, lightning, and tornadoes. 3 vortices on the ground. At least 9 reported twisters spinning through Iowa and Illinois. Watch as lightning illuminates the horizon in Green Valley, revealing a haunting, rotating sky. In Springfield, 2 funnel clouds just hours ago. After a night of severe weather in the Prairie State, this morning, officials are still assessing all the damage. Winds in excess of 70 miles per hour, destroying numerous homes and structures. The severe winds ripping this barn apart, these horses hitting the highway. Cars creeping along roads as they take a hammering from golf ball-sized hail. In Leroy, Illinois, an inch of hail on the ground and fog rolling in, making for a ghoulish scene for those still on the road. Where to go to get inside? In Iowa, hail hitting so hard, drivers taking shelter.
The Kenyan government has issued a yellow fever alert after a case was reported in the capital, Nairobi. A 31-year-old Kenyan male arrived in the country on March 12th through Jomo Kenyatta International Airport from Angola. That country is facing a yellow fever outbreak with some 250 deaths and over 800 infections. The patient was transferred to Kenyatta National Hospital, where he tested positive for yellow fever and later succumbed to multi-organ failure. Kenya is classified as a low-risk country for yellow fever infection, with the last outbreak having occurred in 1992. However, health officials are now required to vet individuals arriving from high-risk countries. Kenya's Health Cabinet Secretary Cleopa Mailu said the ministry had stepped up surveillance, preparedness and response measures to secure Kenya from the yellow fever virus.
Scientists in China are engaged in controversial research genetically modifying beagles to be more muscular. They say it's for medical reasons, but they've been accused of animal cruelty. Here's Seth Doan.
Of the 2,000 beagles at this laboratory in southern China, 2 are making headlines.
These are the ones you are caring about most. Yeah.
Scientists led by Dr. Lai Liang-shui at the Guangzhou Institutes of Biomedicine and Health claim they're the first to successfully alter the genetic makeup of dogs.
This muscle is much stronger.
Yeah. They doubled the muscle mass of these beagles through the process of gene editing. We knocked out a gene which would ordinarily stop muscles from growing, so these dogs became much more muscular, Lai told us.
Scientists here tell us the idea is not to create designer pets, but rather to mimic diseases like Parkinson's in these dogs, and then treat them in an effort to find a cure.
Ultimately, the idea is to create a safe, effective drug. Beagles are often used in research against the wishes of animal rights advocates. Scientists at a lab in Shenzhen used similar technology to create micro-pigs, selling them as pets for $1,600 each. Another lab has drawn worldwide condemnation for carrying out genetic editing tests on human embryos. Some major scientific journals would not even publish the work.
Critics have called China the Wild West of gene editing. Is that fair?
I don't think it's fair. What we do at our lab is for the betterment of humankind, he added. I don't think anyone should experiment on humans before ethical questions are answered. Dr. Lai, a dog lover, insists they need to improve accuracy. Of the more than 60 embryos they gene edited, only 2 were successful.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin is in Moscow today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Rivlin is the first foreign leader to meet with Putin since the Kremlin made the surprising decision to withdraw the majority of its troops from Syria earlier this week. The two leaders are expected to mainly discuss the situation in Syria, and Israel wants to understand how Russia envisions Syria's future. The Israeli president says Israel wants to make sure that Iran and Hezbollah do not become stronger in Syria, and he's calling Iranian fundamentalism just as dangerous as the Islamic State.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin says Israel won't allow Iran and Hezbollah to establish a presence in the Golan Heights. Rivlin's in Moscow this week to meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. And he says the presence of enemies along the chaotic Israeli-Syrian border is a red line for the Jewish state. Rivlin also reportedly told Putin that Israel wants United Nations peacekeepers to return to the border, which they largely abandoned when the civil war spiraled out of control. Putin is vowing to continue security coordination with Israel for military activities on the Syrian border, and says Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will be coming to Russia for talks on regional security and trade.
The U.S. State Department Tuesday criticized Israel for appropriating large tracts of land in the West Bank near the Dead Sea and the city of Jericho, as reported by Israeli Army Radio. The State Department said that ongoing expropriations and settlement expansions were fundamentally undermining the prospects for a two-state solution. We strongly oppose any steps that accelerate settlement expansion, which raises serious questions about Israel's long-term intentions, State Department spokesman John Kirby told a news briefing.
Now, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called on Israel to halt its latest act of a land grab in the occupied West Bank as Tel Aviv announces the seizure of hundreds of hectares of land. The UN chief added that Tel Aviv's decision is an impediment to the two-state solution. According to Ban Ki-moon, such actions would point toward an increase in settlement activities and show Israelis are trying to tighten their grip on the entire West Bank. Earlier today, the Israeli Army radio announced that 234 hectares of land near the Dead Sea and the Palestinian city of Jericho would be confiscated.
A seizure of land by Israel in the West Bank raises questions about its commitment to a two-state solution to end the conflict with the Palestinians, the European Union said in a statement on Thursday. Echoing remarks this week by Germany, France, and the United States, the EU's Foreign Policy Service issued a statement criticizing Israel for its appropriation of 579 acres, 234 hectares, near Jericho. Israel says it intends to keep large settlement blocks in any future peace agreement with the Palestinians. Palestinians, who seek to establish a state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, fear settlement expansion will deny them a viable country.
Israel's seizure of 234 hectares of Palestinian land south of the West Bank city of Jericho. Israel claims Palestinians cannot prove their ownership of the land and declared the area as so-called state land. Palestinian officials say this new land grab is the largest since 2014, and they have warned about Israeli dangerous plans to completely take over the fertile Jordan Valley and divide the area within a steady policy to seize land by force.
This land grab is the largest since 2014, when Israel took over 4,000 dunums of land in Bethlehem. This time the Israeli regime has confiscated thousands of dunums adjacent to 1,500 dunums that were grabbed in the same area last January. This area connects Jericho, the Dead Sea, and Jerusalem. This is a strategic area for the Israelis.
According to anti-settlement groups, Tel Aviv plans to expand nearby Jewish settlements and carry out tourism and trade projects in the Jordan Valley. PA officials, meanwhile, say Israel has taken other steps to clear the area of Palestinians for more settlement activity. They say Israel has been helping the settlers build farms around the settlements in the fertile Jordan Valley.
This right-wing extremist Israeli regime wants to strengthen its occupation of the Palestinian territories. It ignores all calls by the international community to stop confiscating Palestinians' lands by force, so as to use them for settlement expansion. Tel Aviv has taken measures to keep Palestinians in cantons in the future.
We hear a lot about Hamas activities in Gaza, but the latest threat is from the Palestinian terror group, the Islamic Jihad. The group released a video that shows Islamic Jihad soldiers wearing camo and preparing anti-tank missiles to use against the Israeli army. The video also shows an IDF vehicle moving along the Gaza border and implies that the group is waiting for it with weapons. The end of the clip includes a message written in Arabic and Hebrew, which says to show you the shadow of the horror.